There we go. We're officially recording. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest. I'm the founder of Keeping It Human, and I'm a storyteller and a comedian, and I don't know what else. I do pretty much everything but Windows, but I do that too. So there you go. I have a podcast. It's the Keeping It Human improvised marketing show, and I'm so excited to have a fellow storyteller and somebody I really love talking to. My friend, colleague, fellow storyteller, Howell, and he is the founder of the Business of Story podcast. And if you haven't heard it, you must. Park interviews some of the most amazing people. And Park is no slouch himself. He's been doing storytelling for 30 years, brand storytelling. And I just I have to just say, I love your podcast. I love the conversations you have. They're so human, and I learn stuff, and I just love it. So
thank you. I had the honor and privilege yesterday of interviewing Michael Hyatt, and he came on, and it was a lot of fun. And I sent him my questions in advance. And when he got on, I said, "Michael, did you get the questions?" And it was a little trepidatious. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I got to tell you, nobody's actually asked me these questions before." So I thought, well, good. Maybe we really have a differentiated program for this. And it was a lot of fun. He was so gracious, and it was just great having him on.
Awesome. Well, no, and I tend to be, because I'm an improviser, I tend to be kind of an off the script kind of gal, because I like that. I think conversations are more real and raw, and which is one of the reasons I love Blab, because of its improvisational nature, because I think you have more human conversations and not polished talking points.
I'm actually glad to hear you say that, because sometimes I feel like I'm being lazy if I don't totally prepare for these, my podcasts and create all these questions in advance. But I find, probably like you do, that they sort of hamper you. They kind of hamper the organic flow of the conversation. So I am more of a winger, I think, than a preparer for something like that.
And you know your topic so well. That's the thing I find, is if you know you're a storyteller, I'm a storyteller, if you're grounded in what you do and you know your stuff really well, I think the beauty is to just let go and anticipate whatever questions, because I will prepare for my podcast. And what I find is that we won't get to all the questions because, the beauty is somebody will answer something in such an unpredictably beautiful way that I'll say, ooh, let's follow that. Let's go down that rabbit hole, because it's a better line of conversation. And that's the beauty of it, Prepare, but then let go. I think that's the motto.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you, Park, about this sustainable storytelling. And I'm all excited. So, and for folks that are just joining us, welcome. This is being recorded, so if you missed the beginning of it, do not worry. You will catch it later. So, Park, what the heck is sustainable storytelling, and why does it matter?
Why does it matter? Well, I'm glad you asked, Kathy. Our agency, Park & Company, we've been doing a lot of work over the years, really focused on it about 15 years ago, work in sustainability, environmental causes, and social causes, social good, and using story to help kind of, move these missions forward faster. We were having a lot of success with it, with the story cycle process and these different programs, everything from water conservation to air quality to working with nonprofits to even doing an eco-driving program within Coca-Cola in their 60,000 member fleet group. We helped launch that back in 2010. Arizona State University came calling, and my good friend Bruno Sarda, who's the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility for Dell Computer, and he also teaches at ASU, they came calling about a new executive master's program that launched a couple of years ago. It is funded by Rob and Melanie Walton of Walmart fame.
Oh, wow.
They are very, very big supporters of ASU and the School of Sustainability there. And I was invited to come in and create a curriculum around the story cycle process to help teach these executives how to own the boardroom and own the break room when they go in to try to create social initiatives and sustainability programs in large organizations. And we're talking organizations like Bayer Pharmaceutical, Cummins Diesel, American Express, and these are folks from around the world that take this course. So sustainable storytelling is a way to turn data into drama, because in the world of sustainability, you typically are working with engineers and supply chain management gurus that focus on the data around what's going on. So my job is to humanize that data, much like you do in the business to business world and in your brand storytelling work. Simply taking those same kinds of concepts, working with executives who are trying to foster a sustainability, environmental, social cause mindset within their organizations, and then teach them what we all know in the advertising, branding, marketing world of how do you move people to action using storytelling. Now, the one other thing, that layer I will throw on this is it's not just turning the data into drama, but it's actually creating sensitivity about your audiences. And the reason why that's important is, as you might imagine, climate change, human caused or not, is an extraordinarily polarizing issue, pardon the pun, as we melt those. And our job in storytelling, as you do so well, is to first understand and empathize with your audiences. Whether you share their ideals or not, you have to be able to find a common ground from which to build a story, to communicate your side of the story with the hope of creating a clearing that you can all live into in this new way, of the way you want them to behave, or the program you want to launch through the kinds of stories you tell and live into. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, it's important stuff. Well, and it's interesting too, because I was speaking yesterday with a couple other storytellers on a lab, and the topic ethics of storytelling came up. And it's one that we don't talk about very much. And the context was a couple different things, but one of the things that surfaced was sometimes companies are so anxious to tell their story that it looks very manufactured and it looks very over-polished. And I think the credibility can suffer. And when you were talking about sustainability, a lot of companies claim sustainability, but they're not. They don't. There's no proof points for it. And I think there's a fatigue. I think a lot of customers doubt just the veracity of these sustainability stories, depending on who it is. Now, if you're Patagonia, you and I've talked about it, you're credible. You've got longevity because you've proved it over time.
Well, you were born on it. I mean, that's where they all started from.
You're born on it. That was your founding story and your values when you started. But for companies that didn't start with those values, that are now trying to go and claim green and sustainable and all these different things after the fact, are you seeing sort of a backlash? Because I'm seeing a low trust of certain industries that try to then claim sustainability.
Yeah. Without question, and I think they're getting better at it. And a lot of the greenwashing you see is really inadvertent. Sure, you've got the villains out there, spinning their mustaches and said, I'm going to get you. But for the most part, they mean well, but they're not walking it yet. They're getting their talk ahead of their walk. But I think that's changing. And there's organizations like Sustainable Brands that does a nice job of bringing people together. Green Biz does the same thing. And I think people are getting much more careful about how they're talking about their sustainability initiatives, and they're first doing them before they message them. You can look at Dell Computer. They do a really amazing job with their sustainability. They don't even talk that much about it. But when you do some digging, they are one of the leaders in sustainability literally around the world. And they do some cool things, like they've got mushroom packaging. They send out these huge servers with the typical styrofoam packaging around it. Well, a few years ago, they literally found these two dudes working out of their garage, and they were growing mushrooms, not to eat, but to package with. Would make a paste out of them, put them into a mold, and Dell found this and said, this is really freaking cool. So they started replacing all of their styrofoam packaging with mushroom packaging that you can literally, your server shows up, you can take it, throw it out in the yard, and it dissolves within days. I mean, that's some of the cool stuff, an example of it. A lot of that stuff is happening around the world we don't even know about, because a lot of big companies aren't talking about it. And it's those that, to your point, that are really eager to get out there and start, pounding their chest. They got to back it up, because in this day and age, you're going to be found out if you're not authentic about it.
No question. And that, I hadn't heard of that example, but that's interesting. Anytime I hear two dudes in mushrooms, I go, ooh. Go on, tell me more. Well, that's really a great story, and I'm with you 100%. I mean, have the proof of concept and have the proof out there with, and have the track record, and then maybe tell those success stories. And I wonder, because you and I are both fans of the hero's journey, and yesterday, it's interesting, on a separate blab, we talked about some of the pitfalls of the hero's journey, but can you tell me about the story cycle that you use? Is it different when you're applying it to sustainability? It seems to me it'd be very similar, but maybe there might be some things that you have to think differently about. Are there?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, that's the interesting thing as you were talking about the hero's journey. It's such a universal structure that I've boiled it down to these 10 steps, and you can use it for your personal story, your brand story, and in sustainability. What we do in our first course with the Executive Master's Program, for instance, is for the first 6 weeks, these students use the story cycle, this universal structure, to tell their story. As Simon Sinek would say, why are they doing what they're doing in sustainability? Because the one thing we found, especially in something as emotionally charged as sustainability, is people will first suspect your agenda before you can get them to be open to your message.
Yes.
So we always lead with, why am I here? Why does this matter to me? And find that universal truth that connects the value of the storyteller with the value of the audience. This matters to me because, and therefore I think it may well matter to you. Let's join forces and move this forward. So they use it first for their own story, and they use it in the second part of the course to understand their audiences before we even get into any messaging. So they create customer personas of their top 3 audiences using the exact same story cycle process. What is the audience going through at each level of this journey? Then and only then, Kathy, when they have a good understanding of themselves and what their audiences are all about, do we do the third course, and that is, all right, now let's use the story cycle to message your sustainability initiative from the viewpoint, the framing of your audience.
I love that.
What journey are they are on? And then connect it to your why story. Why am I here in front of you? This is the reason. Here's what we need to do. Here's why we need to do it. Here's what happens if we don't do it. Here's what happens if we do it. Here are the pitfalls we're going to have happen as we make this change. But here's what we're ultimately going to live into. And that's so amazing because it all works. It's a fractal. It just works upon it, on top of each other.
Yeah, and you said something really important, which I love, because so often, and we've talked about this, so often we forget, we think about our own hero's journey, but we forget that there's a story that our audience tells themselves about their reality. And are those two journeys in alignment? How do we then make that gap as small as possible? And I love that you reconcile, here's the company, here's our journey, but where's the audience in their journey? And are we telling them a story that they can actually identify with? And I love that we're mapping to the audience, because that's the empathy that we always talk about, but I think some companies get wrong. But that makes all the difference in your story being either heard or just lost in all the noise, right? That mapping process that you're talking about. Yeah,
I want to show you the mapping real quick. Let me find something that's actually going to show up here. I know I had a big, yellow's not going to work, I don't think. Let's try this. And you're exactly right. So in the story cycle, we're going to start, right here. And I even grab one that doesn't work there. Tell me, can you see? This is, here's a green one. This will work. All right, pardon me for my high-tech maneuver here.
It all works.
The story cycle, as you know, is a spiral. You start with your backstory, and your story develops out, and it just keeps growing. It's an expansive thing. So you've got who's your hero, what's at stake, the call to adventure, the villain's fog and crevasses, enter the mentor, where do you come in, the journey, the victory, the moral, and to be continued. And what I find is when you first start with your own story, you get your why story down, but then you want to do your audience's story. So you start, what is their backstory? What are they all about, their demographics and so forth? What's at stake for them? And you just go right around this thing. And then you put your brand story, or in this case, their sustainability story, their messaging around their movement. And it does the exact same thing. And what happens in this crazy life cycle here is you get this expanding Fibonacci curve to really, sequence to below your brain. You're trying to create an expansive story, something that starts from their world at a moment in time where they are being your audience. and you want to expand their knowledge about what you're doing and expand their involvement in your program. But you can only do that by coming from their point of view, not your point of view.
So true. And I love that. And you said something also interesting that I've talked about, and I've always said sort of the emotional raising of the stakes, which in improv, we always talk about the why. Today's the day. We call it today's the day. And it's something that I've written about in the book. It's, what's the emotional, like what happens if this isn't solved? There's that, oh my gosh. And it strikes me that there are so much of what we're talking about with sustainability has that today's the day, because we're talking about things like climate change. We're talking about things like water. And when you talk about California, out here where I live, we've been in drought for 2 years. So there is a what's at stake, and it is a very real collective what's at stake. So you've got the heart of your story there. And maybe talk a little bit about, for the audience, how important that centering on that what's at stake here.
Yeah. It's what's at stake, to your point about what we do if we do nothing, what's at stake, what's going to happen. And then, of course, what's at stake if we do happen, what is the opportunity we can live into. So many people approach sustainability as doing without. Oh my God, I got to cut back here, I got to cut back here, I got to cut back here. And it's really not. What we try to do with the Executive Masters for Sustainability Leadership program at ASU is reframe it from a standpoint of abundance, actually. So, and Bruno, again, from Dell, is brilliant at this. And I'm going to pull 3 things that I base all of my storytelling off of now around sustainability with him. He goes, sustainability is not about doing without. It does 3 things. It has to drive the business. So you think about it, where you develop more efficient supply chains and efficient ways of doing business means you have less impact on the planet, and actually it costs you less in the process. So it drives business. You actually become more profitable. So you can live into abundance by driving the business through sustainability. It reduces risk. So as you get more efficient across the board, that it reduced the risk of the organization. He also tells a really great story about a typhoon that hit like Bangladesh. And I don't have this exactly right, but some place that you would have no idea that 80% of the world's servers, a portion of the server is built and distributed from. When this typhoon hit a few years back, it literally shut down distribution for 80% of the servers. And Dell and everybody had to scramble. Nobody knew that there was a problem within this supply chain, but they identified it after this catastrophe hit. So sustainability thinking, when you think it in a global context, helps you reduce risk for the organization. And then finally, it drives the brand. And it comes back to the stories that you live into and you tell, not only your people, and as we know, as this workforce is getting more and more ingrained with the millennial mindset of it's not just what we sell, but it's what we stand for. So it drives the brand internally, but it also drives the brand externally, because more and more buyers are paying attention to where their stuff comes from. So sustainability storytelling is about the story of literally abundance by becoming more efficient to drive the business, reduce risk, and enhance the brand.
And I love that, because I think it is about abundance. And I think too often we see sustainability painted as a dire situation. And I think that doesn't leave optimism and hope. And one thing I've always said is that I think our jobs as storytellers is to leave hope, and that you can make a difference, and that you have some agency, and that we're not without optimism in the future. And that, if climate change is painted as this, scary thing and nobody can do anything, people are paralyzed with fear. And we've seen some of the negative stories. And I think those negative stories, they have a backlash for a lot of reasons. But if you can frame it with abundance and, hey, there's little things you can do, I think there's a more positive way. And it also, I think your story is going to be heard more. And I think with millennials, they want to know that there's something that they can do and not feel like, well, hey, climate change is happening and we're all going to just be underwater and that's too bad. Which I think you sort of the early climate change stories, I think, scared people. I think they scared people.
And it's hard to get your head around it. because it's such a big thing, you think you can't have any impact. And I want to be clear too that sustainable messaging and sustainability isn't just about the climate. It is about human rights, working conditions, all of that. It's about, doing business right, not just in it for make money. I watched a really amazing documentary last night called The Last Man on the Moon about Gene Cernan, the last of the Apollo astronauts to step foot on the moon. And it was fabulous. I highly recommend it. It's like 99 cents on iTunes. But what it reminded me of is the moonshot that we have going right now in sustainability, and the technology that came from the moonshot and the Apollo programs is just mind-boggling. Just to get us from point A to point B and return us back, safely to Earth in that decade, as JFK called out, created an amazing amount of technology. And we're seeing the same thing happening as we're trying to figure out how do we control what's happening here at home, especially in the environmental sense. And I think that gets lost on people too. But the technology breakthroughs that's happening in solar, electric, battery, what Elon Musk is doing on storage. It's just phenomenal what's going on out there. And so I think that's a story that's not being told well. We have dire consequences if we don't do something, but we also really can make up whole new worlds by tackling this.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. And I also think that AI and AR and VR might help with some of this in terms of storytelling. And you said something interesting, because being married to somebody who's a tech person, and I hear some of these technologies and many of them are being worked on in Silicon Valley and of course other places too. And you're right. We don't hear enough about those stories, and we also don't. And I love that you said this. It's about doing business right. It's bigger than just that little small concentric circle of environmental impact. It's all these things of social justice. And I actually saw a TED Talk, and I'm trying to remember the speaker's name, and I'm blanking. This is bad, but I remember her talk, and she talked about the intersection of social justice and environmental impact. And what people don't realize is that the greatest areas of environmental impact happen in areas where a lot of people fall under the poverty line. So it's not just about doing business right and environmental impact and all these other things. There's a social justice story too. And when we do right as businesses and make better choices, the ripple effect to lower income communities, many of them have a high percent of people of color. That's a huge thing. And I know it's sort of hard to connect all these dots, but they are interrelated. And I was phenomenally surprised at how interrelated they are.
Yeah, they really are. VSI Vistolst. Oh, I know who that.
Welcome.
This is Shlomi. Hey, Shlomi, welcome to the conversation.
Welcome.
It's the Visual Story Institute. It's something that's firing up down in Miami. And I was just out in Fort Lauderdale 2 weeks ago doing a story keynote with the South Florida Internet Marketing Association, and Shlomi set this up. He and his gang out there creating this brand new institute that's really fascinating. The study of storytelling, in a visual sense, in our visual sense.
Yes, and Shlomi, you reached out to me on LinkedIn, so hi, virtually. It's nice. And he's got a great question. We talk about internal brand stories to impact company culture and employees. Ooh, yes. And maybe part of it, because we're talking about sustainability, that's a great question. How do you then tell that story internally on sustainability and get your employees on board? Well, ironically, that's where it all begins.
I mean, if you don't have your employees on board, then forget it.
You got nothing.
Yeah, you've got to get them as a part of this story. They have to be involved. And again, you have to do it from their point of view of, like, okay, for instance, when we did Coca-Cola, this was back in 2010, we launched they had a branded program called Smart Driver, and they wanted us to come in and help them fashion their story around it. Now, this was an eco-driving program to get I think they have 40,000 truck drivers in their fleet and another 20,000 support staff. Now imagine this. Outsiders are going to come in and tell you how to drive your truck. Now, talking about a territory that's highly guarded, it's that truck driver that says, independent, I'm on top of this. Who are you to tell me how to drive? And oh, by the way, this was coming along about the same time as Obamacare came in. So they're going to, automatically say, oh, this eco-driving program is the Obamacare of our fleet operations. What do we do about that? Yeah. So what we did is we told the story from their point of view. Yeah. And we talked about, the fiercely loyal drivers. So we talked about the impact that they would have on the organization for Coca-Cola in the terms of saving money in fuel and saving money in maintenance costs. And we could show them case studies from Europe where very similar organizations, saved hundreds of millions of dollars when you have that many kinds of vehicles on the road when they're doing this. We also talked about safety involved. So it was going to reduce the risk of them behind the wheel. Yeah. We also then talked about camaraderie within the group, and we are going to create some competition between drivers. Who could drive the most eco-friendly, or what divisions could drive? And so we put in we gamified it a little bit. We never really ever talked about, well, we did talk about it, but it was always down the road, pardon the pun, about the impact we were actually going to have on CO2 emissions and the planet. But that's not what they cared about. Right. And that led me to a finding that I tell our students, I tell everybody else, and this is maybe the most important point in this whole broadcast. In selling sustainability, first show them how it's going to save them money. Yeah. Saving our asses is simply added value. Nobody cares. They just don't care so much about that planet impact. But what they want to know is, how does it drive the business? Yeah. How does it reduce risk? And how does it enhance the brand? Everything else from a sustainability aspect is just simply added value. It's added bonus. Yeah, no, and that's such a really great way to put it. And I totally agree. And I love that you did it from their perspective. And I think that's what I think that's where, gosh, one of the things that I'm hopeful about and optimistic about storytelling being decentralized within the organization today is that we're seeing the age of employee advocacy. So the rise of the employee storyteller. And I think, to Shlomi's point, and I love the question, because I think, when I've said this before, and I know I sound probably like an autopilot, but I really believe the best storytellers are not in the C-suite. They're the people who are on the front lines every day, seeing all this stuff. And I think that there's something about, look, top-down storytelling has its place, but I really believe we're in an age of bottoms-up storytelling, and we need to have these employee stories told their way, because I think the worst that I've ever seen is a large company in Silicon Valley that shall remain nameless, but it's a large networking company, very big, and they Hooli.
Well, yes, Hooli, that's exactly right. And they have they acquired, let's call it Pied Piper. But so they acquired all these companies, and what ended up happening was they top down said, here's what the new brand story is, and the people at the bottom said, but wait a minute, that's not who we think we are. And there was such a disconnect between the employees who said, that's not even close to what we believe we do in the world. And they ended up pushing, too bad, this is what it is, top down, without reconciling bottoms up. And it has not been well received. And I can see when that happens, you've left out the employee lens. Look, you're not going to make all the employees happy, I get it. But when you miss a lot of the rank and file and how they feel about their jobs and where they feel passionate, boy, that's a hard time selling that to the employees, and they miss the whole bottoms up impact. And I think that what you're describing is such an important reminder of, you got to go back and make sure that story resonates with the employees who have to live it every day, and they're not going to tell fake stories. Right. The way I look at it, to your point, Kathy, is that rank and file, they're the nonfiction storytellers in your business. Yes. Everything happens up in the C-level suite is total fiction. Bubble. Yeah, it's the peasants down there saying, look, we're living with this stuff day in and day out. Here's what we got to do to have a better story around this. The folks up in the C-suite, they're the kings and queens of the show, or they can be out of touch. But that's the other good thing, and I'm sure you've seen it with your clients, especially in the tech world, is story has a really powerful way of connecting those two worlds, much more than corporate communications does. Yeah. And when you really have to get real with your story is when you have to start opening up the kimono
acknowledging the crap that's not working within the organization, and acknowledging and being accountable that you are going to do something about it. And then and only then can you start getting people rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that some of the worst things to happen to employee communications is calling it employee communications. Because I think the minute you sort of strategize it and you theorize it, people already go, oh God, spin. You've messaged it. You've messaged the truth right out of it. And and that's why you need the raw, real storytellers bottoms up. And I love that you did it through the lens. I think that's such an important point to remember. And I echo, I want to say it again, because you're right. That's an important part of this whole podcast, is anchor it through the lens of the everyday people who have to live with this story, and make sure that it really is their story. And that's where you radiate out. If you can get them to do little steps that, hey, we care about this. Oh, and it's a bonus that we might be helping the planet out. But if we're living with this and we can tell that story credibly, the rest is all goodness.
So why is it so hard, Kathy, in your experience, that for us to stop, take a deep breath, and hear it from the audience, or really truly appreciate and empathize with the audience for which the story we're crafting? Why is it so hard for us? I don't know. I wish I had the answer for that.
I think it's so much like Silicon Valley. And I should tell everybody, Park and I are big fans of Silicon Valley, HBO Silicon Valley, because it's just like, I live and breathe this stuff. With so much of the high-tech companies I've seen that I just cry. I cry, when I watch it. And my husband does too. And I think a couple things. I think management sort of lives in a bubble and thinks that their vantage point, they have to have the brand story, and the brand story has to be sewn up and it has to look a certain way. And what they forget is that there's a lot more honesty in a simple story well told that's true and real. Even if it didn't come from the C-suite, but it's real and it came up the bottom ranks, that's honest and true and better. But there's a distrust of a simple story. And I see it time and time again that a simple story, people go, well, it's too simple and it doesn't have the bells and whistles. It can't possibly be enough. And I think, I say it is enough. It is enough. And if you start putting, way too much, hair and makeup on it and try to make it a beauty pageant queen, you've sort of taken the raw beauty out of it. But I think there is this distrust of a simple story, because if it didn't come from marketing, and I think that's just so silly. I think marketing can be a bottleneck, and marketing, the best marketing teams I've ever met, Park, admit that they're not the best storytellers. But so many marketing teams see themselves as the controllers of the story, and they haven't accepted the fact that that's not what they are. So I think we're seeing a little bit of a disconnect in who owns the story internally. And the reality is everybody owns that story. All the employees are stewards of that story.
Yeah. I think too, in sustainability, and this may be true with all branding, I don't know if it is, but I think it is particularly true in sustainability, is demonstration. It's not, I think first and foremost, a really well-told story in sustainability is a demonstration of something. Show it to me, let me live it. Don't just put a PowerPoint up and drag me through theory. And that's the one thing I have found that's really interesting working in this particular industry and with ASU, is we're not about theory. We're about practical application. And that has really been underscored to me, that the best stories I've seen our students arrive with and present are a demonstration of something that they're actually doing. Much more than a narrative about what they're actually doing. Thank you.
You did it. You nailed it. I think that's it. It's show, don't tell. And the story evolves out of what you're really doing. What you're really doing. And that's, I think, the distrust, getting back to the greenwashing thing. If it's a narrative, it's too polished, but you don't have the data to back it up, I think people are jaded. And if the narrative really, again, that's my problem with the word narrative. I think narrative sounds spun and controlled, and like what we're seeing in politics. You've got image consultants that are spinning your narrative. And I think that's it. Show it. Be willing to have your story told in a way that's very raw and real and not processed. And I don't think there's a lot of companies that are willing to do that. The companies that are are edgy, like the Patagonians of the world, recognize that part of the success is that they don't control the story. Everybody who is a fan of Patagonia buys into that story and has their own version of that story. And they recognize that they're going to tell that story better than Patagonia will. But you have to have somebody who's at the top get that, and they have to let go of that story a little bit.
You know, if your audience would really like to get in depth about this, on the podcast, the Business of Story podcast, we had Vincent Stanley, who at the time was the director of philosophy for Patagonia. He was one of our very first guests when we launched last July.
Yes, great. It was a great interview, by the way. Yeah.
And he's wonderful. You know, he's funny. He said, you know, I showed up and I was just going to help them out for 6 months, you know, 4 years ago. And here he was, still the director of philosophy of Patagonia. But he tells a story, and I think this is really indicative of powerful storytelling in sustainability. They had opened their flagship store, I think it was Boston. You know, 3 floors down the basement, had all their inventory, and then a couple floors above that. It just beautiful. And they were so proud of it. And they opened it up, great fanfare, lots of crowds. And then their employees started getting sick. And they couldn't figure out, I mean, really sick. They were not just missing work, but they were actually having to go to the hospital for things. They could not figure it out until they got down a few weeks of this going on into their basement and determined that a lot of the cloth, the cotton, within their inventory was, you know, had all these chemicals on it, and it was sitting down there and radiating up through their air system and literally poisoning Patagonia employees. So they were just like, I guess they had no idea that this was a problem or that this was a part of the makeup of their product. So the very next thing they did, of course, get that stuff out of there, is they immediately went in and started spearheading the sustainability coalition around garments. They found and now produce only organic cotton. They've gotten the chemicals all out of their process, but they're the first ones to say, look, we created this problem. We had no idea we were doing this, but because of it, we have now, you know, one of the leaders in the industry doing it. So very authentic, extraordinarily honest, and where they were messing up without knowing it, and then how they went about and the great strides that they went about to not only change the way they do it, but the way the industry, the overall garment industry does it.
Love it.
And to me, that's what I love so much about Patagonia is what you see is what you get from that organization. And they have this mantra of turning consumers into activists.
Yes.
Not a tree hugger activist, but just an activist of their own life is saying, pay attention to what you're doing. And by the way, we're a brand or a guide here that can help you in that process. That's what I just love about what they do.
And I remember that interview, and I appreciated it because I think one of the things that I love most about Patagonia is they admitted it. It's not a pivot. Oh, we pivoted, or it's like,
right.
It was none of the weaselly words that I think too often, like Hooly. You know, and the founder of Hooly, God, he cracks me up. He's a composite of so many people I've met. It's not even funny. But you know, and in HBO Silicon Valley, he tries to just scrub the internet clean of any bad negative reviews. And what I love about Patagonia is they owned it. They actually said, we contributed to the problem. And I asked myself, what if companies out there, if they wanted to fix problems and owned it and said, look, we created a problem, we identified it, we're going to fix it, how much more credibility would they have? You know, instead of seeing it as a failure, and we've talked about this before, how much more credibility would they have? But in Silicon Valley, where I live especially, everybody calls it a pivot. Nobody fails. Mm-hmm. And I think customers, that's part of the trust issue. The big disconnect is that customers are just tired of companies out there that, okay, you pivoted, but why don't you just admit you made a mistake, own it, and fix it? And I think the credibility that would come from that, it's amazing to me. I don't know why it's so elusive and it's so hard for companies to get their arms around that. Legal gets involved, and there you go. But you know.
Well, I think it's performing in the game of business that we're always trying to put our best foot forward and always look our best and, you know, not admit to the downfall. But, you know, the companies that do exactly what you're talking about and say, screwed up, here's how we're fixing it, it becomes a very viable market differentiator for them because nobody's doing it or few people are doing it. If they just
Yeah.
have the guts to do that, it can have a tremendous impact internally. Going back to Shlomi's first question, when you are working for a company that is honest and authentic about that stuff, you're going to be all in if those are the same kind of values that you share with them.
Yeah.
And then your market trusts you.
It
You're
is.
like, oh, wow. If you're coming clean on this point, then what you're telling me about over here is probably true too.
Exactly. And as Shlomi's pointed out, and you and I have talked about this before, is that people want to avoid the conflict in the story, but the conflict is where the truth is. It's where the juice is. And when there's no conflict, there's no story. I think there's no story because there's no change. It doesn't set up the arc of change. And so people avoid it. And I always say, no, don't avoid it. Just be smart about how you deal with it. But you have to have it, or there's nothing to connect to your audience. And it strikes me yesterday, Fast Company, there was a list that just came out of the least trusted brands. I think Fast Company, you should look at it. Yeah.
Oh, I got to check that out.
Fast Company, everybody. Fast Company, the least trusted brands. And it was amazing. Here's the interesting part is Uber, Airbnb, all these companies that have these great stories scored very low in the trust department. Yeah. And it's not surprising to me. It actually isn't, because when I think about things like Uber, Uber also has had a lot of problems with their business model. Their business model where their CEO is said, win at all costs. They've had drivers that have raped people, who have robbed people, and they haven't really said to the marketplace, here's how we're taking the steps to protect our passengers. They have a great story in reducing the environmental impact with ride sharing, but the trust is they haven't lived up to the story that they've put out to the market. Yeah. So that gap, that perceived gap in their story is palpable. So it's really interesting if you look at who's at the bottom of the list. And I think Chipotle was down there too, because people are like, hey, you said you were sustainable, but now you're blaming the FDA and you're not really owning the story. And so it's very interesting because people will vote with their dollars, as we know, and that trust matters. That trust deficit matters.
Thanks, Marie. So that's the actual article there. The brands that do the most and least good for the world.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marie. I couldn't remember the title. Thank you. This is why we have wonderful people there. But
I'll have to check that out. But now look at what an opportunity that creates for Lyft.
Yeah.
To really step in and own that mind share of trustworthiness. So I don't know what they're doing about that.
Yes, Murray was on the call yesterday that I did on the Blab yesterday. Well, it's interesting because Lyft has a really important role to fill. And I actually, because I don't know if you know the origin of Lyft, this is a really great one, is they used to have the pink mustaches.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then they decided to get rid of it. But I think the pink mustache was a sign and a signal to women that they were women friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it matters. I'm just going to tell you, as a woman, the very first time I got into an Uber car with an Uber driver, he creeped me out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the message to a woman audience, we get that you might feel unsafe and with a stranger in a car. And we're asking you to take a leap of faith. So that having a lot of women drivers and the pink mustache was, I think, a very credible way to signal to women, we understand you. We empathize with your fear because you're a woman and getting in with somebody you don't know is a leap of faith. And they lost that and they're getting rid of it, which I understand kind of why, but I also think it was very smart to start out that way because I know there are a lot of women like me. Maybe men don't think like that, but women have to. Women do. We think like that. It's a safety issue.
And isn't there a whole new one starting up?
Yes.
That's just for women, driven by women, and only women can get in?
Exactly. For that reason, because they recognize that for a lot of women, to get into a car, it's scary. But then you have these Uber stories where, somebody, raped a passenger and Uber saying, well, we did a background check and there was nothing that would have signaled it. Okay, maybe. But the message still to the audience is Uber's risky. Uber's risky. And so whether it's fair or not isn't the reality. It's about how Uber went on a PR campaign instead of saying, hey, we get your fears, we understand it, and we're going to work to fix it. They took the PR spin versus really owning that story. So I think there is a market now. You're right. There's one, and there's one for children, so that it's all women drivers. If you need a woman driver to pick up your child, they're all mothers themselves. All the drivers are licensed, bonded, vetted women, and they're moms. So you're in effect hauling a Lyft driver who's a mom or some other, I forget the name of the service, to go pick up your child. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting.
So here's a new one. I think I'm going to invent one that is a driving school service. So you get picked up by a kid who's just learning how to drive, and then you rate them, and not until they get a 5-star rating do they actually get their driver's license. But you're going along for the ride, and it's a much more of an adventure than you might, really want to.
Yes, I like that. See? Well, and that's where the stories have to match. The story can be a good one, but it has to match the reality. That's a really important thing there. But Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, everybody. You guys have some really good questions, and I want to make sure I get to them. So if you've got questions, welcome. See, Will Inspire. I like that handle. That's very cool. And Marie, anybody who's got a question, let us know. Or if you want to hop on and take a seat here, we got about 15 minutes left. If you want to ask a question, we'll happily.
While they're thinking about the questions, Kathy, have you ever seen the video called "Follow the Frog" by the Rainforest Alliance?
I have not. Tell me about that.
You will love it. It came out a couple years ago, and talking about really understanding their audience. They actually define the audience in the beginning of this video and says, you are this and this and this and this and this and this, but you realize that you're not doing your part to save the rainforest. So you are deciding you're going to do something. Here's what you're not going to do. And then they take you through this whole guy that goes, quits his job and goes down to save the rainforest and has to wander back missing a toe to get home. And it's beautiful because not only do they identify who you are exactly, they connect with you in your world. They do it with amazing humor. It's amazingly well produced. And their call to action is simple, is look for the Rainforest Alliance label on everything you purchase. And purchase that, because when you do, you're buying from the right people doing the right thing. So a very, very funny way to talk about the problem of our diminishing rainforest and the organization who's not out there on their high horse hugging the trees and keeping you from doing it, but doing it through humor.
I love that.
It's just beautifully done. Yeah, so check it out, called Follow the Frog by the Rainforest Alliance. It's one of my all-time favorites of sustainable.
Follow the Frog. Thank you. I'm definitely going to check that out because I appreciate the humor. If they're going to use humor to be able to do it, I'm all over that.
It's beautiful.
One of the things too that and no worry, folks, if you've got questions, we'll happily take them. Well, it occurred to me yesterday in this blab that I was on. I was reminded that Unilever bought Ben & Jerry's. And that Ben & Jerry's, talk about a credible brand that really walks the talk of sustainability and fresh, organic, ingredients and sustainable farming and all these different things and local sourcing and all these things that, the Ben & Jerry are credible because they've been doing this for years and years and years. And one of the things that was interesting is that Unilever bought them, and the change that Unilever is trying to create and the messaging that they're trying to create, that they are more conscious about these things. And so it was posited that maybe a little bit of the Ben & Jerry's sort of equity has kind of rubbed off internally.
As long as they don't screw it up.
It
sounds like they've done a good job with it. Yeah. Chipotle started with this whole idea of sustainability back in the day, and then they were purchased by who was it? Burger King or Yum? I don't remember. Yeah. Some big brand bought them. Wasn't working. Chipotle bought themselves back. But here's my challenge with Chipotle and their whole gig. Couple things. I had a mother-in-law who passed away from Alzheimer's. And so my wife, Michelle, did a lot of research in that and whatever. And, there's some questions about aluminum foil and that sort of thing in our cooking. And could it potentially, cause it or have an effect on it, whether it does or doesn't. What always threw me about Chipotle is their marketing around this big old burrito wrapped in aluminum foil. When you look at that, the visual storytelling, at least to me, doesn't say organic, all natural, fresh, small mom and pop farms. Then it goes a little bit further into, have you ever seen their scarecrow video?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the Scarecrow video about? They sing it to imagination. It's a real creepy version of it. And it's railing against mass production technology that's creating all of our food that we're eating. And Chipotle, of course, is the foil to that through everything they do. But what do they do at the end of that video? They're trying to get you to sign up for an app, a technology app. And I'm like, it doesn't work for me. There's just too much cognitive dissonance when you're railing against manufacturing and technology to then sell me an app. Doesn't make sense. There's a disconnect there. And in fact, their head of marketing was at Sustainable Brands and they were doing, a panel discussion. And I raised my hand and there's a couple hundred people in the room and they called on him. And I asked him, what were they thinking? And did they get any blowback on that? So that just the seeming disconnect between their sustainability story and what they were, the call to action at the end of it. And he, got sort of all pompous with me. No, we've never heard that before. Next. And I mean, just immediately went on, would not address it whatsoever. And I had several people when that was over come up to me and said, I had that same thing. I had that same thought. So it was just this disconnect. And I think Chipotle actually does not do a very good job about telling their story. I think they do it in kind of a grandiose way. They kind of do it in a chest thumping way versus doing it, say, no, this is just what's good for everybody involved. And I think they benefit by kind of dialing that back a little bit. And then, of course, what's happened with them is that the E. coli, or I was going to say Ebola. I don't think it was that bad. The E in there, which ransacked a lot of their restaurants, and they had to shut down and take care of that. Well, I haven't heard a lot of messaging about that either. Some chink in the armor.
It's interesting. I never really thought about the aluminum foil thing, but now that you mention it, I can see that. That is a big thing, and it's inconsistent with their story.
Yeah.
And you're right. The only thing that I've seen recently out of Chipotle, sadly, is a lot of blaming the FDA. And look, we all know the FDA is, understaffed and under-resourced to really properly look at the food supply 100%. We know this. However, nowhere in there was there any acceptance of fault. And we're sorry, this is what we're going to do differently. Right. I think that they had a big opportunity to own a portion of the blame, and they never did. And I was really disappointed. I was really disappointed.
They needed to own all the blame.
Yes.
They really do, because it starts with you. Every leadership coach that's worth their money will tell you anything going wrong in your group begins with you.
Name's on the door. You get the CEO paycheck. Guess what? When crap goes down, you own that too. Yeah,
exactly right. So I think that's just a good example of it. And I like Chipotle. I like their food.
Me too.
Here's the other thing about the Chipotle experience that I find interesting. You go in there and they kind of race you through the line.
Yeah, they do.
You kind of blow through it, and there's an abundant amount of food, and they give you a lot of food, so you have great value for what you buy. But it also sort of, at least to me, creates this continued cognitive dissonance about what they supposedly stand for.
Yeah.
The unrushed life of small farm America. We're in this together. I don't know. It's just they're very interesting to me because they're just peculiar about how they own that sustainability story that they share with people.
I think you're right. It's a little bit of an assembly line when you go in there, which is a little bit against what they've stood for. And it seems to me, if we sort of bring the conversation kind of full circle to like, what could they do better? I'm thinking just about your sustainability kind of approach. And it seems that as they grow, any company is going to have these hurdles. And the best thing that they could do is say, here's how we're trying to adapt to the growth so that we stay true to our story. But you don't see any of that. And that's unfortunate. It just, there should be more of that. I also don't see a lot of employee storytelling or customer storytelling. Right. And I just think that they're missing some of the big pieces in their whole strategy.
Yeah. The first thing, if I was them, what I would do is I would tell everybody I hire, take a breath. Okay, so you're serving back there. Take a breath, smile at your customer, give it a beat, but don't make it feel like an assembly line going through there. The food's great. The food's really terrific, but it's just that. And then I think I would look at my messaging and I'd try to be less Hollywood about it. And I think I would just get to be a little bit more real in how they present it.
I think that's great advice. I think it's great advice. So if there's any more questions, we'll happily take it. So just kind of to wrap up here, Park, if there's one piece of advice, I mean, there's so much good stuff that we talked about. One big thing, what would you want to leave people with when it comes to sustainable storytelling?
Always start, the old razor of start with the end in mind. So if you're going to get up and you're going to talk and you've got a story that you want to put together, what is it that you want your audience to do? What's the point? Make sure that you have that really focused in versus just talking about something. What is it that you want them to do? And then find a way to demonstrate what it is you want them to do versus just, telling them in a narrative or whatever. Typical advertising marketing, let me bombard you with messaging and content marketing. That's all well and good. I think in sustainability, you somehow have to demonstrate it in the way you tell your story or in, physically, be it a video, your visual storytelling. But take them on a journey that demonstrates what you are trying to achieve versus just talking about it.
I think it's brilliant. I think if you're going to talk about sustainability, you better be sustainable in everything you do, because that's going to speak louder. That's everything you should. If you're, and I know Shlomi will appreciate this. If you're saying you're the head of the Visual Storytelling Institute, then you should be using visuals in everything you do. It's just if I'm a humor person, I should be using humor in everything I do. I think that says a lot. I think that's really important. So you got anything, Park, coming up that you want to tell everybody about?
Oh my goodness, I got a really exciting trip. I'm going over to London. I'm working with PH Creative over there at that agency.
Say hi to those guys, Brian, and all those guys. Say hi.
They're awesome. They're awesome. We're going to be doing a storytelling workshop in Liverpool, half-day workshop. I'll start it, they'll end it, and then we are going to go to London, and we're doing another storytelling workshop at LinkedIn, who's a client of theirs in London.
Nice.
Then I'm moving on into Amsterdam. I'm going to be doing a master class there with some of the local politicians and business leaders. And then I'm meeting up with our 18 students in our executive master's program from ASU. We do this every year. And we'll be spending 9 days in Amsterdam working with Philips Electronics, KPN, KPG, a number of large corporations over there. And the idea there is for our students to get embedded. What do the Dutch know about sustainability? I mean, because they do such an amazing job with it there. And they go in and we do a lot of day in, day out, face-to-face work with these companies. Our students are given a challenge. They have 2 to 3 hours to sort through the challenge. And then with my course, they have to come up and give a presentation or tell their story. Here's what we think you need to do. Here's why, and here's how to get involved. So that's going to take me through June. I leave in a couple of weeks for that. That's some of this fun stuff I've got going on. How about you?
Awesome.
What do you
Well, I've got a couple clients that I'm doing workshops for, and my book, which is called Stop Boring Me. I finally got to tell. It's called Stop Boring Me: Improv-Infused Techniques for Creating Kick-Ass, Engaging Marketing Content. That is the title of the book. It's going to be out probably end of July, early August. It's with second edits right now. So, that's kind of occupying a lot of my time right now. And I'm very excited because it's about storytelling and content creation, but it's all the threads are from my improv background. And I'm so excited to be able to do that because I think so much of what I learned on the stage and in comedy, I still use, and I bring that into my storytelling. And comedy is the best storytelling training I think I've ever had. Yeah. It really is. And so I'm really excited to bring my world of stage together with the brand storytelling. And I'm going to be happy when this baby is finally born. So probably early August, end of July, somewhere in there. And then I've got my marketing podcast, the Improvised Marketing Show, Keeping It Human Improvised Marketing Show, where we have guests and we just talk about everything and anything, storytelling and improv. So you never know what's going to happen, what's going to come out of everybody's mouths, but it's completely off script. And that's how I roll.
I keep threatening to take an improv class. I just got to make the time to do that.
Well, I think you need to. In fact, I'm going to have you, when you get some time, I would love to have you on the show. And
take me through the course, and then we'll improvise from a guy who has never done any improvising other than talking his way out of a parking ticket or something.
Well, and I'm just going to leave it with that. Everybody's an improviser. You may not have taken a formal class, but I think if you're a business person, every human being improvises every day, and we just overthink it. But if you're doing interviews and you're doing storytelling, I think we're all improvisers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and what I always leave my audiences with, and I will leave you with today too, is I firmly believe that after all this business and sustainable storytelling and all that, the most potent story you ever tell is the story you tell yourself.
I think that's
true.
You
better make it a good one.
I can't top that. I can't top it. Make it a great one. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We recorded it. If you missed the early part of it, never fear. Go back to Blab and find the video, and you can listen to the early part. Park, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kathy. This is great leading into the long weekend. Have a wonderful weekend.
Well, you too as well. Bye, everybody.
All right. Take care.